Hi, I'm Bob. Welcome back to the Solutions to the Textbook Microeconomics Theory and Applications with Calculus, the 5th edition by Professor Jeffrey Perloff. Today we will solve exercises for Chapter 11 about the taxes and monopoly. For exercise 3.1, if the inverse demand function facing a monopoly is PQ and its cost function is CQ, show the effect of a specific tax T on the monopoly's profit maximizing output. How does imposing the tax affect its profit? Suppose the specific tax is imposed on the producer. The monopoly's after-tax marginal cost function is as follows. We can also write its marginal revenue. At the profit maximizing output, Q star, marginal revenue equals marginal cost, where Q star is a function of the tax T. Differentiating the equation with respect to T gives the dq star over dt expression. From the second-order condition for profit maximization, we know that the denominator is negative. So dq star over dt is negative. It means as the specific tax T rises, the monopoly's profit maximizing output Q star decreases. For the monopoly price P star, we know dP star over dQ star is negative because the demand curve is downward sloping. So dP star over dt is positive. It indicates that monopoly price rises with the specific tax. Finally, for the monopoly profit, it must drop. Before the tax, the monopoly could produce at the after-tax output level, but did not choose it because it was not a profit maximizing output level. It means profit drops if that output is chosen before tax. Now, after the tax, the monopoly has to pay part of its profit as tax, further reducing its profit. Let's solve exercise 3.2. A monopoly with a constant marginal cost M has a profit maximizing price of P1. It faces a constant elasticity demand curve with elasticity epsilon. After the government applies a specific tax of $1, its price is P2. What is the price change P2 minus P1 in terms of epsilon? How much does the price rise if the demand elasticity is minus 2? Suppose the constant elasticity demand function is P equals Q to the power 1 over epsilon. So its demand elasticity is a constant epsilon. We can derive the monopoly's revenue R and marginal revenue MR. Assume that the tax is imposed on the monopoly. Its marginal cost is M plus T. To maximize its profit, the monopoly equates its after-tax marginal cost with its marginal revenue. We obtain the after-tax profit maximizing output Q star and price P star. Without the tax, we can find the profit maximizing price P double star by the same logic. Or we can just set T equal to 0 to find the P double star. The difference between the two prices is a function of the tax and demand elasticity. If the specific tax equals $1, then the price difference is as follows. If epsilon is -2, then the price rise is $2, which is higher than the tax. Let's find answers to exercise 3.3. We have the inverse demand curve and the inverse supply curve. We will compare the tax incidence on consumers for a competitive market with a monopoly case if a specific tax of 1 cent per unit is imposed. We first consider the competitive case. We can write down the inverse demand and supply functions without the tax. The market equilibrium is the intersection between the two curves. We obtain the equilibrium price of $0.2. With the specific tax, we rewrite the supply function. Remember, the supply curve is part of the firm's marginal cost curve. The tax increases the firm's marginal cost and shifts the supply curve upwards by 1 cent. We obtain the new equilibrium price, $0.207. The incidence of the tax on consumers is the difference between the two prices divided by the tax. It is 70%. Next, we consider the monopoly case. We can write the linear marginal revenue function directly from the linear inverse demand curve. We have the marginal cost function. The monopoly chooses the profit maximizing output Q star such that marginal revenue equals marginal cost at that quantity. After we obtain the monopoly quantity, we use the inverse demand function to find the monopoly price. It is $0.85186. If the tax is imposed on the monopoly, its marginal cost function shifts upwards by the amount of the tax. The profit maximizing output and price can be calculated. The monopoly price is $0.85597 with the tax. The incidence of the tax on consumers is 41% in the monopoly case. Let's solve exercise 3.4. It is about the profit tax. How does a profit tax affect a monopoly's output and price? How would a monopoly change its behavior if the profit tax were 10% rather than 25%? The monopoly's profit after tax is as follows, where nu is the profit tax rate. The government collects a constant proportion of the profit. We can rewrite the monopoly's profit and then take the first derivative with respect to quantity so that the profit is maximized. We obtain the same first-order condition for profit maximization without the tax. It implies that the monopoly quantity and price are unchanged after the profit tax. The profit tax, whether 10% or 25%, will not change the monopoly's behavior. Let's see exercise 3.5. If the inverse demand curve is P equals 120 minus Q, and the marginal cost is constant at 10, how does charging the monopoly a specific tax of T equals 10 per unit affect the monopoly optimum and the welfare of consumers, the monopoly, and society? What is the incidence of the tax on consumers? We can write the linear marginal revenue function directly from the inverse demand function. We also know the marginal cost. At the monopoly quantity, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We obtain the monopoly quantity, 55, and the monopoly price, $65. Using the graph, we can calculate the consumer surplus, the blue area, the producer surplus, the yellow area, and the deadweight loss, the green area. We then consider the specific tax. It shifts the marginal cost curve upwards by $10. Equating marginal revenue with marginal cost gives the new monopoly quantity, 50. From the inverse demand, we obtain the monopoly price of $70. With the help of the graph, we can calculate the consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss. The government collects $500 as tax. We summarize the results in the table. We see that consumer surplus and producer surplus are reduced after tax. Society's welfare also drops. That is because the deadweight loss rises after tax. The deadweight loss is computed compared to the competitive case without the tax. Finally, the incidence of the tax on consumers is 50%. Thank you so much for solving all the exercises with me today. See you tomorrow. Take care. Thank you for watching this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. See you next time.